On Nightline, drugged up. New safety concerns about American livestock, pumped dangerously full of antibiotics. Is this old-fashioned farm where the pigs are treated like kings a safer way to raise a pork chop? Plus, superbugs, the secret dangers lurking inside hospitals, turning medical care into medical nightmares. Can one state's new ranking system force hospitals to clean up their ways? And the time of their lives. Dirty Dancing, the musical, hits the London stage. And 20 years since the movie touched America's hearts, women are still lining up by the thousands. It's a sign of the times.
From the global resources of ABC News, with Terry Moran in Washington, Martin Bashir and Cynthia McFadden in New York City, this is Nightline, November 14th, 2006.
Good evening, I'm Cynthia McFadden. Tonight, how safe is the food on your table, and how much of what goes into the livestock and poultry we eat is also going into our own bodies? It's a growing concern as food production becomes increasingly mechanized and centralized. We begin with the pigsty, and one hog farmer who learned the hard way about what's getting into our food after an encounter turned violent. Nightline's Vicki Mabry begins our new series, You Are What You Eat.
Hours before sunrise, Russ Kramer is already hard at work, mixing and grinding the feed for the 1,200 hogs he raises on his farms in Frankenstein, Missouri. Kramer's family has been raising hogs here in Frankenstein, population 30, since arriving from Germany in the 1840s. Kramer modernized. In accordance with industry standards, he raised pigs like this, in confined indoor spaces with daily doses of antibiotics used to prevent diseases in healthy pigs. Until one day, 15 years ago, when he was gored by a boar and nearly died.
My leg swelled up about between 50% and 100% bigger than what it was, and I knew I had a problem. And so I went to the doctor, and they prescribed different antibiotics for what they term a strep infection. And the penicillins didn't work. None of the tetracyclines wouldn't work. Amoxicillin, erythromycin, the list went on and on. And after a week, the leg kept getting worse. I was about ready to die. What we realized was that the strep that I got from the boar hog's bite was a resistant form of strep from a boar that was fed a continual amount of penicillin throughout its whole life.
Kramer had an epiphany after his near-death experience. Realizing he was contributing to antibiotic resistance, he changed his philosophy of farming.
Knowing that I was possibly propagating this throughout society, I went home and decided to exterminate my herd.
Today, Russ Kramer preaches the virtue of farming humanely, using antibiotics only when a pig is sick.
You all right, recording? We've got to raise pigs more sustainably without these inputs and without expensive type of production systems.
Half of all pork producers in the United States routinely use antibiotics on healthy pigs to prevent disease and promote growth, which concerns Dr. Margaret Mellon.
The use of antibiotics in farm animals, quite surprisingly, is enormous. Our estimates indicate that we're using something like 13 million pounds of antibiotics in food animal production every year.
It's a trend that the CDC and other scientists view with alarm. Does a case like Russ Kramer surprise you? Does it trouble you?
It does trouble me. It doesn't surprise me. Because we are using way too many antibiotics at too high a level routinely in agriculture. I expect these things to happen not only to farmers like Russ, but to the rest of us, and in fact they are.
Russ Kramer has now returned to farming almost the way his forefathers did more than 100 years ago. It begins at birth in this barn-turned-maternity ward, where these baby piglets arrived just moments before we did. What's the difference between the way your pigs are allowed to give birth and the industry standard now?
Yes, this isn't necessarily normal for the industry. It's not the industry standard, because industry standard again is hogs that are pigs that are farrowed from a sow in a crate, in a more of a confined situation, without bedding, without the ability to turn around. Even the natural airflow that's in this building, that's not normal. I think the biggest difference probably is the concentration of animals, and that's why we feel that we have the ability to raise animals without antibiotics.
If there's a hog heaven, this is it.
Well, that's Frida, that one in the corner. I know her. I've known her since she was a piglet.
Kramer's sows have names.
There's Emma, and that bigger white one there with her head pointing that way, that's Sally.
They live in little communities.
So these pigs actually have a life, somewhat of a life, before they go to market.
Yes, they do. Just look at them. You know, they run and play. They are able to experiment with digging in different substances. They have bedding. They socialize with their friends. They visit from family to family. And yes, it's happy pigs.
As much as pigs can be free range, these are, which is almost unheard of on modern factory farms. Most pigs raised in the U.S. today see the outdoors only when they're headed to the slaughterhouse.
The sows look different. Are these
Breed.
different breeds?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit different situation than what the industry wants these days. They want a very uniform-looking animal, all being white, because they're easier to process at the slaughtering plant.
Kramer raises heirloom breeds, flavorful Tamworths and Berkshires and Duroc and Landrace.
It's kind of like, heirloom tomatoes that have a better flavor, better taste. We use the old variety of hogs.
These hogs wind up on the menu at some of the country's finest restaurants and in supermarkets under the label Heritage Acres. You'll pay a few cents more per pound, but the label means the hogs were raised and slaughtered under exacting standards.
And should consumers question it?
Consumers should have a choice. And should they question it? Yeah, my opinion that consumers should question who produces it, how it's produced, and where it's produced. And they should make that choice.
Kramer is president of the Missouri Farmers Union, a cooperative for farmers interested in practicing what he preaches. In Missouri, only 200 of the 2,200 pig farms raise hogs the way Russ Kramer does.
Are you losing money compared with the larger commercial farms?
No, I'm not losing money. In fact, I started this system, because it was not only was the right thing to do, I felt consciously, but also because it saved me money. That first year that I was able to save, basically $14,000 on my input supplies as well as my veterinary bill.
$14,000 in a year?
$14,000 in a year.
By doing what?
By basically going cold turkey on using antibiotics. The hogs stay healthier. They cause less problems, so they're easier to raise.
Ultimately, farmers need to change their practices so that they don't rely on antibiotics as crutches. In order for farmers to change, they need leadership, and that leadership has to come from the Congress of the United States. It also has to come from the Food and Drug Administration, which regulates the approval and the cancellation of antibiotics used in agriculture.
But the FDA says its role is limited to determining if the drugs are safe and leaves it to the marketplace to decide how they're used.
Where you at, Barney? Come on, get up. Come on, get up.
So as Russ Kramer sends his little piggies off to market, he sends them with a clear conscience because they've been treated well, and since the pigs are antibiotic-free, so have we. This is Vicki Mabry for Nightline in Frankenstein, Missouri.
For its part, the National Pork Council says its members use antibiotics in a manner that is beneficial to the animals in their care and to the consumers of their products.